Right, welcome to today's live, and I'm going to show you a bit of painting today, and this lovely little Stoat picture. Can't see that what's in the screen. That looks right, does it? So yes, I'm going to show you a little bit of painting. This painting is about a third of the way through of 3 little Stoats playing. It's a super little composition, and yeah, I'm going to show you some part of the process of doing this painting. So with Sam, if you want to bring the camera around.
Yep.
So I've got Sam joining us today. Will's on holiday, so I'll just get this painting into position where you can see it, and I can tell you what I'm up to.
So it's just hold it. There we go.
Alright, I'm just mixing a bit of paint down here, and I'm just sort of highlighting where these Stoats actually meet the rocks. So we're just picking out this. There's some quite thick acrylic paint here. This is on a gouache background, so I've got to lay this acrylic down quite thick just to build up a bit of resistance against the gouache, which can actually run when you put too much water on it. So a good coat of acrylic over these rocks. And then once I've got that in, all these darker areas I'll be working on where the shadows are in the rocks. So the background on the rocks is actually going to be blocking the basic colours in now, and always work dark from light, but I'll be adding some texture into this paint by just using thick paint and paint that's sort of dried a bit on the palette, which is not fine enough to do the detail on the Stoats. So any paint that I won't be able to use for the finer details, I'll drag off the palette and use it up so we're not wasting any paint. This is really thick acrylic going on here. So if you have any questions about the painting or any other parts of the wildlife, send them in, and I'll answer them the best I can. There's a lot happening at the moment with the wildlife outside, and we have a female Stoat in the garden who's given birth to kits, so we'll be tracking her nest down over the next week, and seeing if we can bring you some footage of a female Stoat near her den site, which will be really exciting. We're not giving birth on camera inside our nests, but we are hopeful we'll capture some amazing stuff of Stoats again this year. So it's one of Bandita's daughters that we think's given birth. So these little Stoat kits here are about 8 weeks old in this picture, and full of fun and mischief, fighting and playing. I'm not too fussy about how this paint goes on at this stage. We're just getting some coverage and creating a bit of texture while we're doing it. So the more texture I get into this section, the later stage becomes much more easier. So I'll use the back of the brush like that, creating some texture. There's no quick way of showing you this process because it takes time, so there'll be several weeks work in this painting, and I'm just showing you a tiny little moment of it.
Shall I ask you a couple of questions whilst you're painting?
Yeah, so Sam's going to ask me a couple of questions. Will's having a week off, but I'm sure he's watching us because he wouldn't want to miss a moment.
So we've got a question through from CC Truth, and they ask, did you learn how to paint on your own?
I did 4 years at art college, but a lot of the technique is sort of self-taught. Yeah, it's. I did 2 years in a BTEC course in York, and I wasn't allowed to paint any wildlife at the college. They said it was old-fashioned and boring, so I never painted in that college for 2 years any wildlife. But I learnt some techniques there, and then the second course I did was a wildlife illustration course. But I learnt really as much as for myself, going out, watching the wildlife and painting it, and just bouncing off of the students there. So yeah, not completely self-taught, but yeah, 4 years at college, which helps, definitely.
Then we've got a question through from Victoria B, who is...
You can just come closer and then we can hear you on the mic, so
Yeah.
just switch the laptop round.
So we had a question from Victoria B, who is one of our moderators on YouTube, and she has asked, do you paint the subjects first and then the background?
It really varies. So I'll nearly always put a base colour down, whether it's, this is just a simple tone here, so there'll be always a base colour, and quite often I map out the wildlife and then start building up the background, and then I go back in and finish the wildlife. I never finish the wildlife and then try and paint around it, because it just looks like you have painted around it. So it's a mixture of all of them really. Yeah, it depends on the painting very much so, but usually base colour, and that can be sky or it can be a little bit more complicated, and then the wildlife. But I'll always have a rough idea where the wildlife's going, because I don't want to create texture on the fur or feathers that's in the wrong direction. And if I do, sometimes I have to scrape it back and cut it back with a scalpel if I've got textured paint that I'm not happy about.
We've also got a question through from Red L Owl, and they ask, what inspired you to paint?
Oh, it helped that I couldn't really do anything else at school. I was, and still am, dyslexic, and yeah, so I was actually, from the age of 13, I got really interested in wildlife, and I got interested in painting it at the same time. And by the time I was 15, that's what I decided I want to do for a living one day. So I concentrated all my efforts on that, and left school barely being able to do the alphabet, which has changed more lately. I have actually learned how to do the alphabet at about 35. So yeah.
So we've got another question, and they ask, when did you start to paint?
When did I start to paint? About doing wildlife when I was about 13 at school. I didn't do any other homework, but if I got art homework, I'd always do 2, and I'd always try and make it into wildlife, the art homework. Yeah, from age 13 I was noticeably different and more talented just at the wildlife than other kids, and that's what I concentrated on, because I struggled with every other subject at school, and that's one I excelled in. So that's what I concentrated all my efforts into.
So we've got an interesting question here, which I'm sure will interest a lot of people, from Sarah Cunningham, and she has asked, do you take reference from your photographs?
Yeah,
or do you sketch them live?
Yeah, I mean, I used to sketch live a lot with the wildlife, but when your head's down sketching away, your wildlife disappears, and I want to watch every single moment of the wildlife, so often I'm there photographing and videoing. I can be operating up to 5 or 6 cameras at once, and yeah, I use photographs as a composition I've made there. I've even like cut different bits of stoat out and things, and different heads, just to make a rough composition, and then painting that composition now. So yeah, I use my photographs quite a bit.
I'm just going to rotate this phone because apparently it's come up sideways on one of the... Perfect, that should be fixed now.
I'll find another question. So we've had a question from CC Truth again, asking, does anyone else in your family paint?
Yeah, they do. My granny, both my grandparents, my grandmother on my mother's side and my father's side were pretty talented at painting. And yeah, my dad's does wildlife photography, but painting's in the genes somewhere, but it's a lot of it's actually just hard work and practice. You know, homing the skills. You don't suddenly be able to have a skill to paint one day. It's all, you know, about, I would say it's about 10 or 15% talent, and the rest is actually wanting to do it and actually putting a lot of effort into getting the skill level up to par, really, to produce lovely pictures.
We did have a question before about someone on the YouTube chat had asked about Stoat kits. Do you want to tell us a little bit more facts about the Stoats?
Yeah. So Stoat kits born about 2 weeks ago. So they're born at the beginning of this month, and in this country, and they're quite fixed to that sort of timescale within 1 or 2 weeks. All the Stoat kits are born in this country at that time of year, whereas weasels, which is like the least weasel, are much more, the smaller ones, much more adaptable and can have 2 litters a year, whereas Stoats are fixed to 1 litter a year. And the female Stoat actually does delayed implantation, so she'll be actually being mated right now at this time of year, 2 weeks after she's given birth, sometimes as early as 1 week after birth, and she uses delayed implantation to have the kits the following year. And some gory details is the Stoat kits can actually be mated now at 2 weeks old, while they're still quite tiny, and they also do delayed implantation until the following year. So 2-week-old Stoat kits could already be viable to carry a litter themselves, which is quite remarkable. And they then start coming out at around about sort of 7 weeks old, 6-7 weeks old. Their eyes open at 5 weeks old, and then they come in above ground at about 6-7 weeks old. And we can have up to, or the largest litters we've had here is 9 kits. They can have up to 13, but 7 kits is very common. And this is just 3 of them here playing, and they stay with the female until they're released. They're very dependent on the female until they're about 12 weeks old. And I've known them with the female until they're about 17 weeks old. So that was one of Bandita's litters in 2018. There's only 3 in the litter, and they seem to stay more tolerant of each other. And then it comes down to midsummer then, and they all seem to fall out and start fighting and go their separate ways. And sometimes one of the kits will stay in whole territory here, and sometimes even 2. So we've had 2 litters in the garden before, but that leads for a lot of rivalry and scrapping in between the females, and then sometimes later on the kits. So 1 litter is always pretty good, and we hope to bring you some Stoat information soon. Really, we're busy tracking this Stoat down and trying to find out where her nest is.
So moving on from Stoats, we have had a lot of questions regarding Chester the weasel.
Yeah.
And how is he doing?
Yes, we released Chester, and he sort of stayed around here for at least a week. We kept capturing on camera or seeing him out in the garden, and after that week we then haven't seen him again, so we just have to hope that he's made his way and gone on and found a new territory, because we do have a few Stoats in the garden, obviously. They're large cousins, and so it would be fairly normal if he went and found territory down one of the valleys here, is what we're hoping, but we never know when we release these. unless they stay on site, so we're just crossing our fingers that it's okay.
I had a question here that you might like. It's how do you find time to paint among the million other things you do?
Very tricky. Yeah, nearly impossible. I never stop before midnight, and yeah, so it's yeah, busy to say the least. So, but I have to paint because that's my job, and yeah, that's the crux. You know, that's our business, is the art side. So it's very necessary. Yeah.
So I think we've got time for a couple more. We've got one more towards a technical side. And Heart My Art asks, what kind of acrylics do you use?
So I use Liquitex acrylics, which are these ones. So these are from America, so it's Liquitex. And that's the only acrylic I use. So that's the only acrylic I've used for nearly 30 years. So yeah, that's the one. So I've used other acrylics. They may have improved more recently, but that's the only one I use. Because it's just got very good pigment, and I just like it. And once you get used to something, you just keep using it. It's reasonably expensive, but it's I found it the best one. Some of them are a bit, yeah, I've just not got on with the other makes as much as this one, so I've stuck with what I know.
Perfect. And for those viewers who have watched the Little Owl stream, they will know that there is currently a barn owl in 3 trees, and London Calling asks, how do you feel about this?
How do I feel? It's been pretty frustrating, really. That nest box, so we've had little owls showing interest, but that nest box was put up for kestrels, and there has been a male kestrel there looking into that nest box for a few weeks now, and on the day, I know we've had the odd tiny glimpse of a female up there, but nothing completely concrete. And then the day he brings the female to the nest, there's a barn owl in there, and it's a female barn owl that we have worked out that was a rehab female here in 2017, which is brilliant news that she's still going and doing well. So we're really excited about that, but then maybe to lose our kestrel nest, which was a potential there, is a bit difficult, but we have no signs that that female barn owl has a mate at the moment, so we're literally just crossing everything that it has a mate and breeds in there, or the kestrels breed in there, but it's all up in the air at the moment, so we just have to sit tight and wait and see. At least it's not a jackdaw, so which is good news. So yeah, we were hoping for the kestrel. So this afternoon, literally when I finish this, I'm going to go and put up another nest box, but it's not that close to there. It's about 250 metres away, and I'm hoping the kestrel will spot it. He's been down here today, the male kestrel, from up at Ashwood, trying to find a nest box, and he was with us again yesterday down here. So he is looking for a nest site. And it would be extremely lucky if I managed to pull off putting a nest box up now and him taking it up, but if you don't try, you don't get. So yeah, so we'll be altering slightly the another nest at Ashwood potentially as well, to make it more suitable for kestrels. At the moment it's suitable for tawny owls because it's got a long drop into the nest, but if I can make that more kestrel friendly, I will, and hopefully we get him. But yeah, wildlife can be tricky. So how do I feel? Yeah, I feel pretty good. We've got a barn owl in there. I'm pretty devastated we don't have a kestrel nest in there. But the little owls were back this morning at the nest site, which was really good to see. We haven't seen the pair there for quite a while now, and I presume they picked another site. But they've obviously had problems at the other site, potentially with jackdaws, and they've come back to the little owl nest this morning. So we just have to wait and see if that's a long-term interest or whether it's just a short visit.
And then we've got a nice question through from Jenny C to end on. which is which birds / animals in your garden do you most enjoy painting?
Which birds and animals? Ooh, gosh. I like these little guys. I like stoats and the barn owls and the tawny owls and the weasels and the the list goes on. The kestrels. Yeah, it's if I painted one subject all the time, I would tire of it slightly. So I love painting all of the animals that I know in the garden. I suppose that one of the favourite will be the barn owls. I like the stoats as well. They're a bit more unusual. Not everyone has stoats in the garden, so or barn owls for that matter. So yeah, right.
Let's bring them back across here.
Yeah.
Just watch your shoulder.
Alright, well thank you for joining us today, and I hope you've enjoyed watching that little bit of painting, and we'll be back with you next week, and hopefully we'll have some more news for you next week about different nests, hopefully, maybe some stoats we're looking for, so hopefully we'll find that nest and bring you some footage from the stoat nest as well. See you later, thanks for joining us.